in our first conference 3 years ago, had the opportunity to introduce the notion that there may be international capital available to mitigate some of these impacts. And in our last conference last year, we sort of became slightly more concrete about this and introduced the notion of introducing an earthquake solution. An earthquake solution, and which focuses really on the heritage, on the cultural tradition of Nepal. And with this, I would like to open up the conversation and really have us discuss this idea a bit further, and at the same time, I want to give you an update, and Iain will be doing that, on where we stand. May I perhaps ask Basanta to open the debate and give us a bit of a positioning, who are the different actors in building a resilient country, also with, we talked about climate change, but perhaps also with regard to earthquakes.
Thank you, Eckart. Very good afternoon and namaste. It's my great pleasure to be here in this August panel and also in this wonderful conference. I think this topic, insurance from the future disaster, perhaps somewhat new and innovative concept in this part of the region, but it underscores very high importance from two particular reasons, I would say. As we also heard this morning that Hindu Kush Himalayan region is a disaster hotspot. If you look at the kind of a global kind of statistics in terms of disaster occurrences, whether it is earthquake, landslides, floods, you know, the amount of casualties perhaps is 50% of the world total statistics is in this part of the region. You know. Not to mention the large-scale disaster induced by climate change. Just to mention, even the last year South Asia flood, 2013 Uttarakhand floods, 2010 and 11 Pakistan floods. You see the very large-scale disasters having enormous amount of casualties, property loss, and on its environment. Also from ICIMOD standpoint of view, we mentioned that a high map, one of the most comprehensive assessment from the science point of view, you know, and we have given a due recognition in terms of disaster and the resilience building of the mountain communities in the Hindu Kush Himalayan region. Perhaps I think this is also a wonderful opportunity for ICIMOD to build bridges with the businesses and to see from the insurance lens, to see from perhaps from the business lens, you know, see what are the elements and how we can really, you know, safeguard or provide the insurance kind of instruments from the future disasters and so forth. I think you mentioned almost 3 years ago, Nepal earthquake perhaps is a painful reminder in terms of the kind of casualties loss and the heritage loss and so forth. And I think we are still in a rebuilding process, and I think one of the key elements in terms of the disaster relief and also response and recovery effort is, I think, the liquidity, access to finance. And I think the innovative financing mechanism provides that sort of information. I also would like to take a brief moment in terms of what ICIMOD has done in response to that earthquake. Any large-scale disaster that happens around the world, the demand for information goes exponential rise. Also, demand for financial resources also goes exponential rise, both in terms of relief and reconstruction and the relief operation. So ICIMOD has led international coalition with number of international partners like NASA and European space agencies and many other international UN organizations to provide, to manage that information so that how we can really provide this sort of information for the disaster relief and recovery efforts. In the Western world, my understanding is one of the biggest consumption of this information is the insurance industry because of before, after imageries and others, So I think also if you look at from the technological point of view, the convergence of technologies, and I just would like to give one example from the private sector on satellite image company, premier satellite image company, Digital Globe. They put free access to high resolution satellite imagery, millions of dollars of work. And they also open up the crowdsourcing Tom Nod platform. Now, through that Tom Nod platform, there were more than 18,000 people around the world helping in the crowdsourcing this information, So just wanted to raise a flag that the power of a technology and the power of a collaboration to leverage in terms of relief and recovery efforts and so forth. So I would tend to think in terms of your question, who are the key actors? And I think the collaboration is the key. I think the public sector, the government agencies, the private sectors, the industry, the civil society, and the international and UN bodies, I think the collaboration is the key, perhaps, I think, in terms of these responses. And how do we really provide some of the innovative financing mechanism from the insurance is, I think, is a way forward to go. And from Ishimoto's standpoint of view, we are in a learning curve in this, and we have an August panel from the insurance companies and also reinsurance company from PICRI. So we are in a learning curve, so to speak. I'll just stop here. Perhaps I'll come back later.
Thanks very much. And you're absolutely right. Yes, the more data, the better. But before we go on into looking forward in innovative solutions, I would like to ask Sushil to relay some of the experience on the ground from the last earthquake. You were here with your company, the local insurance company. You had to deal with the reality. What was your experience? What's your learning effect?
Thank you, Eckart. Yeah, regarding this earthquake, after earthquake experiences, it's actually it's a bad experience, but that earthquake gave insurance industries to experience to handle the big natural catastrophic losses, and this is the biggest natural catastrophic losses in Nepal, especially in terms of insurance. There are a lot of losses. When we talk about the losses, the economical losses are around, estimated is around 5 billion, whereas insured losses is around 175 million US dollars. The gap is quite big, and that is our concerns. The gap between the insured losses and economic losses is because of uninsured properties. Quite a lot of properties are uninsured, especially on the villages and in urban areas as well. And most of the government properties are not insured. Similarly, when we talk about the heritage structures are uninsured. So now we can see quite a lot of heritage sites which are still waiting for funds to reconstruct. And my concern is if they were insured properly, they could have reconstructed on time. They could have good funds to start immediate reconstructions. That is my learning from this 3 years back earthquake.
No, thanks very much, Sushil. And I think you point at a very important feature. If a property is not insured by the insurance company, eventually it's insured by the government, by the taxpayer, by families, whomever. And because it is so perhaps difficult to get more properties to become insured, our thinking, Iain, has been slightly different. And why don't you relay where we are standing?
Sure. Thanks, Eckart. The solution which we at PICRI have proposed to this is a structure based on a concept called a catastrophe bond. Now, this differs slightly from a traditional insurance product. Traditional property insurance is very good at protecting specific assets, but the process of negotiating first the policy and then settling a claim can take quite a long time. And as we've already heard, the real issue in terms of protecting heritage sites and infrastructure is an immediate release of funds. And that's where we think a structure called a catastrophe bond could help, in that it's not based upon indemnifying a particular asset. It's based purely upon the parameters of an event which caused loss. So this is something called a parametric trigger. And we think we could structure a financial instrument to protect heritage sites in the Kathmandu Valley, which would release funds instantaneously based purely upon the parameters of an earthquake that occur. So you really just need 3 publicly available parameters, which would be the location of the earthquake, potentially its depth, how far down into the ground it's happened, and the size of the earthquake. And just using those 3 simple parameters, you could calculate, you could have a prearranged payment mechanism. And this gives you immediate liquidity post-event. This is structured as a bond, as an investment product, and it requires a sponsor to pay into it. Now, in order to structure this bond so that all parties agree the terms correctly, you need an independent risk analysis. So this is something carried out by a team of experts or specialists in this field to agree the risk to the structure that's been designed. And there are a number of commercial vendors which do this sort of work. And I think the key success that we have had in looking at this is in persuading the 2 leading providers of these services to do this on a pro bono basis. Now, these are very successful commercial organizations, so they've been very, very generous in agreeing to do this for free. And we are in the process of finalizing the structure. They have done the work for us. So we believe that in a sort of the 1% range, so the 1% of the amount of insurance bought, you can structure a sensible protection for the Kathmandu Valley for heritage sites. The real advantage of this in terms of the providing capital is that it's instantaneous. The advantage of this in terms of the sponsors, perhaps development agencies or charities, is that it's a secure, transparent, and above all, predictable, budgetable mechanism. The cost of securing this is a few percentage points of the cost of releasing, of accessing this capital post-event. And the final real great point about this structure is if this works, this is a wholly transferable idea. This could be rolled out across the region or even further. So we're not there yet, it's finished, but we've had some successes in structuring this and we think it's a sustainable idea.
Thanks very much, Iain. Absolutely, and perhaps if I may add one other aspect, the current idea is to focus this on the heritage of Kathmandu, and the thinking behind this one is that, and perhaps Sushil, coming back also to your intervention, is after an earthquake, it's extremely difficult to assess damage and to do all the wizardry that you need to do as an insurance company with loss adjusted and so on the ground. But what we are thinking, and I would like Sushil to invite you to comment on this, is that we appeal to the entrepreneurial spirit of the local communities. and by rebuilding the fantastic, or focusing on the fantastic spiritual and heritage of Kathmandu, you mobilize almost confidence and get communities working again. Is that something that you have seen after the last earthquake?
Regarding these heritage structures, after earthquake, especially I'm from Patan, and especially in Patan when we go around, when we see the heritage structures are reconstructed, it's really, we feel good, right? So that gives a very good message to all the communities as well as international levels. And for the structures, we need fund for restructuring the properties. And if these heritage sites can be restructured, start reconstruction works at earlier stage, we can maintain it, use the old items as well. So for that, being an insurance company, if we have a good insurance protections for these sites, insurance will provide a liquidity of funds to the community or partners, reconstruction partners. It could be a government, it could be a municipality, it could be local authorities, it could be a combination of all the representatives committee. So insurance will provide the funds to them so that rebuilding can start immediately and giving the good message to all the communities, I think. Is that right?
And thank you. And I think what is important, and I think comes out, this is nothing that we can only do from Hong Kong. We need a lot of very powerful and strong partners on the ground. And this is also where we need then, private, but we also need institutions like ICIMOD with their ability to provide strong data, to provide guidance on what is sensible. With this, where would you see, sort of an opportunity for ICIMOD and public or similar organizations to contribute?
Thank you for this question. I think ICIMOD as a knowledge center, we believe in bringing in some of the innovation, some of the technology, some of the tools, approaches in the overall disaster management cycle. So I think if you look at from the disaster point of view, risks and vulnerability analysis, the damage assessment, and also use the power of technologies like, just to give an example, even Nepal earthquake, the kind of a technology that we have used from unmanned air vehicle to mobile devices to satellite technologies to remote sensing GIS platform with the international collaboration to synthesize the kind of information, the volume of information, and to be able to provide to different actors, whether these are public agencies, whether these are disaster responders, and many other civil society organizations. And this we did as a public-private kind of a venture, bringing the government in, having a one single window of delivering this piece of information in terms of disaster response and also disaster recovery efforts. So I think ICIMOD has a strong role, and it's been playing that sort of a role to enhance capability in terms of data information management for the disaster, not only disaster response, but in the overall disaster management. Also, I just would like to throw a point that I've been in a lot of these disaster-related conferences, and there are three things that needs to be done in terms of the disaster prevention and mitigation. They say preparedness, preparedness, and the preparedness. And there is a statistics that every dollar that we spend on preparedness, you have a $4 saving, So the kind of a financial instrument I also would tend to think is, can we also look at some of the innovative financing mechanism as we see the upsurge of the green bond or the resilience bond or the catastrophic bond that we see in the international market? What does that really mean in this part of the region for the Himalayan region? in terms of looking at accessing some of these instruments and see how we can use from that point of view. So as of now, we are more focused on the more technical enhancing capability, but blending this with some of the financing instruments and to help support the governments, I think that would be a key role from the government.
Look, I really like your statement, because I think what you introduced is an important idea here. We have heard a lot about the challenges this morning, but I think you put much more the focus on also the way we can address them by making use of technology, of data. So it is not only that we are stuck with a problem, but we have we can also believe in human ingenuity, basically, and progress to address them in an intelligent way. Iain, with that, sort of concept that you just described, what would be basically the next steps? Who else need to contribute now to make this workable?
I think there are a number of parties which would potentially be involved. I think the most important parties, now that the risk analysis is done, are an investor group and a sponsor. The investor base we would envision as capital providers with a strong corporate social responsibility program, who are prepared to invest in a bond for a modest return. We would envisage the sponsorship community being charities or development agencies, such as those which have been mentioned already today, who could benefit from a as I mentioned, a more predictable, budgetable financial burden rather than a shock loss post-event.